2020 started with a lot of expectations. I'm sure you would agree with me. We all had plans and goals we looked forward to, but all of that came to a pause when the WHO declared the novel coronavirus COVID-19 as a public health emergency of international concern. On the 2nd of February 2020, that's when this announcement was made. As the days unfolded, we started to deal with an uncontrollable outbreak for the virus, which the WHO immediately declared a pandemic. We began to experience an increasing death toll all over the world, and our best chance at fighting this existential threat was to stay at home. Governments had no choice but to lock down their countries to curb and mitigate the spread, which in turn affected businesses, economies, reached an all-time low, sending countries into recession, which had a compounding effect on the unemployment rate and economic activities like trade, investments, commerce, and so forth. Statistics show that 30.5 million Americans have filed for unemployment. The COVID-19 outbreak rendered over 20 million Americans jobless in April. And in the first week of May, companies started to lay off their workers. Even firms like Uber, Lyft, and Airbnb that disrupted the markets were disrupted by another disruptor, COVID-19. As it stands, we are learning and adjusting to fit into a whole new system. But the good news is that economies are beginning to reopen again, thank goodness. In the face of all this cataclysmic occurrences, the future still remains very bright. According to a report by the World Trade Organization in 2019, world merchandise trade volume was forecasted to grow 2.6% in 2019, accompanied by GDP growth of 2.6%. Trade growth should pick up to 3% in 2020, with GDP growth steady at 2.6%. Trade growth in 2020 is expected to outpace GDP growth due to faster GDP growth in developing economies. Has the pandemic stalled this process? Of course, yes. But will it still be possible? The answer is a resounding yes. Trade will bounce back, and so will every other branch of our global economy. As we brace up for a new world of opportunities after COVID-19, we need to understand what the future holds, especially for commerce and business, to ensure that we are not swept aside by these waves of uncertainties the pandemic has brought us. And that's why we decided to set up this meeting for you and I. And the ultimate goal is very simple: to help us navigate the times ahead with a compass of knowledge. I welcome you all to this conference. Thanks for joining in, and I hope you are ready to journey into the future, which is commerce after COVID-19. You are very welcome. All right, so with that welcome remarks, it takes me to the next thing. Zoom is familiar. It's a platform that are maybe familiar to some of us. Some of us are learning. So what we do in all the conferences and meetings we have someone who can help us with the Zoom etiquette, we call it. And there's no one other than Dr. Wendy Brisley, who will take a moment to help us navigate through the Zoom system. And then I will come back and do the introduction of all the powerhouses of speakers that we have been blessed to be part of this great inaugural event. Dr. Brisley, please take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Remy. I like to do a little introduction about Zoom to make sure you have the best possible experience today. Here's a few helpful secrets. On your screen, you can click participants to show the list of attendees. Locate yourself on the list. You should be at the top of the list. Please make sure you are signed in with your full name. To change your name, move your cursor to the upper right area of where your name is shown and click on those 3 dots. There's a drop-down menu. In the drop-down menu, you can select Rename. Enter your first name and your last name, please. Also, today, we want to share with you an item that we don't find so nice, and that's spam. We have a definition of spam: soliciting or sharing your email or contact information in the chat area without being asked to share while in this experience today. Also, please make sure if you submitted your questions to the info@legacypremier.org. If you're not available to do that, please send them to the chat box to Dr. Remy, and she will try to get to those as well. Also, we want to make sure that you have your icons of your microphone and video. Please make sure your microphone is off while the speakers are presenting. But we would like you to be having your video on so we can see all of your lovely faces here this morning. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brisley, for that Zoom etiquette. It does help. Every time I hear that, it reminds me of the rules and regulations. Thank you so kindly for doing that for us this morning. So my next item here is to introduce our speakers. What I'm going to do is, I couldn't do justice to introducing even one of them all day. I would still be introducing. But because we know your time is priceless, it's valuable, we are going to ensure that we adhere to your time. So what we've done is to kind of summarize it very succinctly and to let you know who these people are, and not to take away from who they are, but by the time you hear them speak and engage with them through the Zoom interaction, you will be convinced and know who you know they are. So I'm not reading in any particular order, but I'm going to start the way I have the papers presented to me. So we have today 7 speakers. I believe that I have seen at least 6 of them. I haven't been following who else have joined, so I'm hoping that the 7th person will join. But in any case, we're going to introduce everyone collectively with their information and give them the opportunity before they speak to introduce themselves, to share what they want us to share that I might have missed or I might have left out. So please forgive me if I leave anything out that's so important. That's not to take away from who you are, because you are priceless to us, and thank you. So the first speaker that I have the privilege of reading the short bio on is Professor Pielo Lumumba, who is currently the Professor of Law and Advocate of the High Courts of Kenya and Tanganyika in Kenya. So we are excited about that. Dr. Patrick Lumumba is also was someone who served as a director of the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission from September 2010 to August 2011. Since 2014, Professor Lumumba has been the director of the Kenya School of Laws. He's an eloquent lawyer. Dr. Lumumba holds a PhD in laws, you all. PhD in law is amazing. Of the C from the University of Ghent in Belgium. Dr. Lumumba is also a staunch Pan-Africanist and has delivered several powerful speeches alluding to all about African solutions to African problems. Dr. Lumumba is someone that I have met from afar, and I had the privilege of meeting in person about 2 years ago. And the minute we had that meeting, I knew this is someone that I clearly want our entity to connect with, because he comes with a fountain of truth and knowledge, because there's a difference to have knowledge and also have truth with it. But he comes with a fountain of knowledge and truth, and he's just unapologetically truthful and factual. So I love that about him, and that is what attracted me to say, you know what, this is a mentor from afar that one can lean on. So welcome, Dr. Professor Pielo Lumumba. We are honored to have you today. My next speaker is Miss Roshonda Johnson. Miss Roshonda Johnson is a business development specialist with formerly OPIC, now called DFC, U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. Ms. Roshonda Johnson is a business development specialist in the Office of Development Credit at the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. As a business development specialist, Ms. Roshonda focuses on counseling U.S. companies seeking financing, money, financing, evaluating new project proposals and loan applications, and developing new business opportunities. What her entity does is mobilizing investment to support the global fight against COVID-19. I was reading the other day how far they have started with that and how much they are doing to ensure that they mobilize investment to support COVID-19, especially in developing nations. So that is Ms. Roshonda Johnson, someone that I also have had personal relationship with for over 10 years in different levels. So it's an honor to have you accept our invitation, and you're very welcome. My next speaker here is Mr. Alan Bird. Mr. Alan Bird is the Managing Director of Interlink Capital Strategies. Mr. Alan Bird has over 30 years of solid international finance and business development experience. He currently leads Interlink Capital Strategies, a management consulting and private equity firm based in Washington, D.C., focusing on overseas business development and financing in emerging markets. Mr. Bird has personally led several structured project finances in Africa, Latin America, Eastern Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, ranging in size from a few $1 million to over €1 billion, using government risk mitigation from North America, Europe, and Asia. Alan also is someone that we respect his knowledge, his intellect, and his network in the area of global business. Clearly speaking, he's one of the go-to sources. And in his resume, he has worked for so many of these agencies before he started his own several years ago. So because of time, I couldn't go back to the past, but he's been with all of the developmental agencies. So he comes with a boatload of experience that we can all leverage. The next on my list is Otumba Bimbo Ashiru. Otumba Bimbo Ashiru is the former Commissioner of Commerce and Industry and presently the Director of Oodua Investment Company Limited. For those who might not know, this is a house where there are investment opportunities that are needed to make the lot of the western region of Nigeria better. So I'm sure by the end of this journey, some of us are going to need to connect with him to see how we can help to provide solutions to all the goals and aspirations. Otumba Bimbo Ashiru was the former Honorable Commissioner for Commerce and Industry in Ogun State, Nigeria. Under his stewardship, the business environment of the state developed beyond imagination, with over 1,279.8% of increase in internally generated revenue of the state. That is a big deal, to create an a system for internally generated revenue, which helps the government. So we know that Otumba also has always been, and his investment profile is so huge. He has represented his state here in the United States, represented them with the World Bank and so on and so forth. Now, again, the report that we get from Ogun State during his tenure was as a result of what he created. He made doing business in Ogun State something that was embracive and attractive. Like I said, he's currently the director of Oodua Investment Limited, a conglomerate with substantial investment in real estate, agriculture and agribusiness, construction and manufacturing, financial services, and oil and gas, amongst all the leading sectors of the economy. There's absolutely no sector that Oodua Holdings does not play in. So clearly speaking, that is someone we want in this network to ensure we can provide solutions to the needs of the organization that he represents. The next speaker is Thomas F. Matthias. He's a global trade sales officer for trade finance and trade banking services in Regions Global Trade Finance Department. In this capacity, he's responsible for delivering customized trade finance solutions for Regions clients engaged in international business. Mr. Matthias joined Regions Bank in 2016 as Vice President with trade finance and trade banking business development responsibilities, not just for one state, for several states: Georgia, East Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia markets. What is unique about Mr. Matthias, like several others, he comes with a boatload of good experiences in the trade and finance industry. Again, time would not permit me to read all of his previous places of expertise and where he served, but he is a powerhouse when it comes to trade and investment. So we're honored to have him on this platform. The next speaker is Mr. Brian Castleberry. He is the regional manager for the Middle East, Africa, and India Office of International Investment and Trade. Mr. Castleberry is the regional manager for Africa and all of these areas. The Department of Commerce in the state of Maryland, he manages offices in Durban, in Dubai, and Delhi. Through his office in Baltimore, Brian assists Maryland companies with all aspects of trade, such as market assessment, reports, relevant industry contacts or potential commercial partners, and market insight into opportunities and challenges for businesses. He holds degrees from the University of Maryland, Baltimore. Brian is one of those must-know kind of an individual in the area, because Maryland is always open for business, but Brian's office brings the practicality to play. They let us know truly Maryland is open for business. So we're honored to have you, Brian. And the last but not the least speaker, my friend, Dr. Wendy Brisley. She is the community director at Alliances Washington, D.C. Wendy Brisley is a dedicated, proactive professional with over 30 years of experience advancing education. Wendy is an expert in strategic planning, program and impact evaluation, and analytics to inform decision-making and improve program effectiveness. She's currently community director at the Alliances of Washington, D.C., popularly tagged as the place where entrepreneurs align. I know that's right because I am one of you. As community director, Wendy constantly organizes strategic meetings between entrepreneurs, startups, politicians, corporate presidents and CEOs, and angel investors, leveraging their associations to establish strong networks and profitable business relations. Wendy and her organization clearly demonstrates the power of strategic networking, how that would work for you. So we are honored to have Wendy here today, and you are all very welcome to this day. I don't know if Mr. Thomas Matthias has joined us. I was reading, I couldn't see who joined. So we can get straight to our speakers. Let me see if he's on the line. Please bear with me. What I am not hearing a response, so I'm going to take that as possibly a not yet. Can Thomas unmute if you're around? All right, I believe he's going to make his way here. So we have introduced all of our speakers. Some are already here and some will be joining us. But for those who are here, we are going to get started. Like I said, one thing that I am a stickler for, and I'm so sorry, is time. Because I do not like people to waste my time, and I don't like to waste people's time, because when you waste my time, I won't want to come back to your party again. So, and I know people are like me that are crazy with time, to respect them because they have other things to do. So if Thomas is not in the house yet, which I cannot hear a sound one way or the other, that is going to take us straight to Professor P.L.O. Lumumba, who now has more time to talk to us. We can have him all day. So we would like to have you take the floor and talk to us, Professor Lumumba, about not just what we are going to say to talk about, the power of the diaspora and the role of the diaspora in nation building, and all of the great things that you have always gone about advocating for today. Without further ado, I present to you, I introduce to some, Professor P.L.O. Lumumba. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. First, let me thank you for organizing this conversation. I will be faithful to the assigned subject, the role of the diaspora in nation building. And I think that is pretty critical now, particularly because we all appreciate that COVID-19 has impacted all economies throughout the world in a very fundamental way. And not a single country was prepared for this. All the focus that were made by economists and other institutions have now come a cropper because of the impact of COVID-19. And I'll be very faithful to my continent of Africa, and of course, Africa operates in a global setup. The GDP of our continent has suffered fundamentally. I know that the typical organizations will give very conservative figures about how far the economies will have contracted. They'll say 6%, 2%, 6%. Some of it is normally meant to humor governments. But the reality on the ground is that there are countries whose economies have shrunk by no less than 40 percentage points. There are whole industries which are literally dead. If you look at a number of industries, for example, in the hospitality industry across the continent of Africa, most of the hotels are closed. The tourism sector is on comatose. If you look at the aviation industry, it's in comatose. The consumption of fuel has gone down. agriculture is not performing very well. If you look at the raw material sector, that is also not performing very well because of decreased manufacturing. Jobs have been lost, and there is a sense in which the continent is going to suffer in a very dramatic way. And you will note, of course, that quite a number of African countries still depend on the thing that we've called it by different names over the years. It used to be aid, then it became development partners, but by whatever name. We depend on the IMF and the Bretton Woods institutions and USAID and CEDA Canada, CEDA Sweden and UK, and all those institutions that are established in the conceptual West. But even the conceptual West itself has been affected in a devastating way. I was just reading about how the Germans have approached it, and they are spending nearly 60% of their GDP to respond to their specific programs, which means that there'll be very little money available for them to share with their traditional partners, which then begs the question which preoccupies everybody's mind: how are we going to operate post-COVID-19? And my view is that there'll be no post-COVID-19. You know, there is this assumption, depending on whether it doesn't matter which language you speak, whether it's English or French or the Luo or Yoruba. It is as if COVID is here with us like a football match. After 90 minutes, it will end. That is not true.
I didn't say
COVID is with us for the long haul, in the same way that influenza has been with us, in the same way that yellow fever has been with us, in the same way that malaria is with us. It will only cease to be more virulent. And that is how
Dad, put your headphones in.
And that is how we
Why would I
should.
mute my phone?
And my view, therefore, is how do we deal with the post-lockdown environment? And how do we deal with our economies in the new dispensation, which will be a dispensation with new protocols in terms of travel, in terms of trade, in terms of how we run our business, in terms of how we run our factories. And that is what begs the question: what is the role of the diaspora in Africa? The diaspora in Africa, or rather the African diaspora, is huge. It is in the neighborhood of nearly 200 million. That is just about the population of Nigeria, which is the most populous country on the continent of Africa. And these individuals who are out there are some of our best trained men and women in every sector. If you want to look at engineering, medicine, business, every area they are represented. And you will see, if you look at the statistics, there are countries as I speak in Africa whose foreign exchange is actually remittances from their citizens in the diaspora. Countries such as Eritrea, countries such as Zimbabwe, whose population, about 40%, is outside of the mother country. Countries such as Guinea-Bissau, quite a number of countries in the Sahelian region. So going forward, how do we ensure that they engage with the continent in an institutionalized manner and in a manner that makes commercial sense? Thus far, particularly those of in the diaspora who say are of African American origin, or those who are in Brazil, have had what I call a fleeting sentimental attachment to the continent, such as the year of return. I think we must now go a notch higher. It must be a critical engagement that is informed by love for mother continent. The Italians in America do it, the Irish in America do it, and many others. So it behooves us to organize in a different manner, courtesy of COVID. And what are the possible areas of intervention? Number one, in the financial sector. We've got to ask ourselves that these 230 million plus who are out there in the diaspora How can they engage with African governments in a manner that they can support the financial services? What is going to be the role of the African Development Bank? And how are we going to source and access these resources? That demands that a number of things be done at various levels. As you know, Africa is divided. Africa has 54 sovereign countries who are members of the African Union, but there are also regional bodies. We have bodies such as SADC, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, East African Community, COMESA, the Central African Grouping, and the Maghreb. And all these are once again under the aegis of the African Union. And I think that having a structured engagement with these existing bodies in the financial arena is going to be very useful going forward. And I'm very happy to note that the African Continental Free Trade Area, which has now received 54 signatures and 28 ratifications, will be coming into force in the month of July this year. And that is going to be critical, because what is going to happen is the tariff and non-tariff barriers are going to come down, and intra-African trade, which conservatively now stands at 20%, could be enhanced to go into the neighborhood of 50 and 60%, in my view, within a shorter period than happened in Europe and Asia, because we now know that the reality is that you have to depend on yourself in critical matters, which has only been exposed by COVID. So I think that in the financial sector, that is the role that the organized diaspora can do. The other thing is that we must identify the critical areas in African economy, in agriculture. Most of African countries, by default, some may say, by design, moved away from agriculture when they discovered fossil occupy a more space. I am saying that right now, agriculture is yet again one of the areas in which we can engage the diaspora in order to mechanize agriculture, enhance value addition. And once again, I think that the diaspora, with the exposure that they have in the various countries where they are, whether it's in Australia or in the United Kingdom or in the United States of America, can engage very well. The third area is in the area of technology. Technology, now that we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, how are we going to consume technology? Look at a technology such as this, Zoom. Zoom has suddenly become in my view, I believe that African universities and African institutions should also invest in this by ensuring even intervention in the health sector is going to be very useful. I am noting, for example, that Rwanda is already using robots in that area, and many other countries are also very active in that area. The fourth area is in the area of pharmaceuticals. The 15th largest pharmaceutical companies in the world are either from Asia or the United States of America or Europe. I'm saying that once again, the diaspora can engage in that area to ensure that we are true participants in the area of innovation. So in a nutshell, being alive to the time that has been allotted to me, let me conclude by saying the following by way of dovetailing my thoughts. Number one, that the diaspora has a critical and fundamental role to play, but only if they work intimately with government and private sector in the continent of Africa. Number two, that the diaspora must engage in an organized way. In other words, we must have an institutionalized approach which enables government to identify the men and women who are the arrow's head in this engagement. Number 4, the diaspora must have a footprint in the continent of Africa. This is not the kind of engagement that will be run from Maryland. You'll have to have some of your number having physical presence in the continent of Africa. And number 4, we must ensure that we in the continent of Africa create an environment that is enabling. And an enabling environment means that we remove unnecessary tariff and non-tariff barriers, and that we make traveling easy by way of introducing the African passport and encouraging dual citizenship. I think that if we put those issues on the table, then the diaspora will play a critical role in the environment that has come about courtesy of COVID-19. I leave my contribution at that stage, knowing as I do that it will be cross-fertilized and pollinated at once by other participants.
Thank you so much, Prof, for that powerful message to us diasporans, and also for citing the great examples of people who have done it. And most importantly, that we are charged to not just talk about it, to be about it. And being about it is not gonna just mean staying where we are comfortably. It's gonna start with the conversations we're having right now. And it's also gonna start with taking it to another level. You cited a very brilliant example of the year of return, the excitement, the hype, and the action that was consummated as a result of that. But what's next? And that's why this forum that we are starting is about. This is not just a one-off. It's a way that we are trying to, likes of you, who are on the diaspora, who are in Africa especially, you are our real icon that we can identify with in Africa, having likes of you who can support us as we bring our African and our American friends to Africa when they want to do business, makes life easier for us. That's why we are especially honored that you are part of what we're doing today, because this is not just the beginning. I mean, this is not just the end, it's the beginning. And we see you as a shoulder we want to lean on and learn from, and see how together we can rebuild and reset. The whole world is at a reset right now. So we can all rebuild and rebound together. So thank you so much, Prof, for that powerful message. I'm so glad we are going to be able to listen to this again. And I'm sure some of the listeners are probably, wow, everybody wanted to get a chance to hear you speak. So this really has been a very helpful conversation that we've had, and we will be calling on you again. So please don't forget us. We are going to call you again and again and again till we get it right and we get results. It's not a talk shop, and you are not about talk shop. You're about results, and that's why you are going to be in our corner, Prof. So stay tuned. We're calling you back soon. Blessings. Thank you so much. And we know you have another engagement, so anytime you need to take your leave, we're honored that you were able to grace our event today. But we encourage you to stay along, join, still have more fun. There are more speakers that you might be able to enjoy one thing or the other from. So
yeah, I'll receive the recording. Thank you very much, and have a good conversation.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir. So our next speaker is Mr. Alan Bird. Mr. Alan Bird, I introduced earlier. So Alan, if you're under the sound of my voice somewhere, please take it away. Let us hear all this great stuff that you have in stock for us. Thank you.
Okay, I was going to try and share a slide presentation just to make this a little bit more interesting, since with a forum like this, sometimes it's difficult to know people's reactions. Are you able to see the slide presentation at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So following up on what Dr. Lumumba said, obviously the COVID-19 epidemic has changed the world. But this slide that I'm putting up here is a little bit of a play on Thomas Friedman's famous saying that the world is flat. Certainly the business world is flat. Of course, Thomas Friedman is a New York Times columnist and a New York Times author, bestseller. And he pointed out as the economies of the world have is to kind of show, particularly American audiences, that the GDPs of what we term the emerging economies of the world now exceed the GDPs of the developed world. And that means that if the world is truly flat, American businesses ought to be looking to do business outside the US more than they currently are. On the side, you can see it says 95% of consumers are outside of the US. And that's, let me move into there we go.
This way say it's a mountain. Only the alignment.
So the next,
Please, can you mute your phone or your computer?
So the next slide is essentially to show that indeed, until the COVID virus, emerging and frontier markets are actually faster growing markets. So not only is the larger economy outside of what we consider the developing world, it's also a faster growing component of the world economy, and it's something that US companies ought to think about as they look to expand their business opportunities. So even though Thomas Friedman has rightly pointed out that business and even the COVID-19 can be transferred around the world because it's flat, unfortunately, when it comes to finance, the world has never been quite as flat. And the reason for that is that there are a variety of reasons that prohibit capitals from flowing into emerging markets. Most notably is the fact that there are risks, both real and perceived, that prevent people from either making investments in or doing transactions in markets that they perceive to be very, very risky. And there we can get into a whole host of reasons of what those risks are. It's everything from transparency to corruption, both real and perceived, to transparency, to foreign exchange risks, to language, to culture. There's a whole host of reasons that emerging markets and frontier markets have been viewed as being risky and therefore difficult to make investment in. And unfortunately, as I said, because the world isn't flat, the governments of the world have come up with programs to try and address this issue and make financing as fluid as, frankly, business has been in other sectors. And these institutions are known as export credit agencies or development finance institutions, which really are designed to facilitate cross-border transactions. So just very briefly, most nations of the world have export credit agencies. Their role is to support their home team's goods and services. In the US, we have the US Export-Import Bank. You've got export credit agencies around the world. Actually, the largest export credit agency in the world is China Exim Bank. And these institutions, out of their own self-interest, are trying to encourage countries in emerging markets, for instance in Africa, to buy their country's goods and services. And part of the incentive to buy their own country's goods and services is to provide financing schemes. And they essentially mitigate some of those risks, both perceived and real, that I mentioned before. And in this post coronavirus, and I know that's maybe being hopeful, their role is probably going to be even more critical. I sat in a forum a couple of weeks ago with the chairwoman of US Exim Bank, banks, and Exim Bank, like many other US institutions, is trying to do all they can to address issues that will help during this coronavirus. And what became clear in that conversation is, even though Exim Bank is talking about giving even more incentives for financial institutions to provide support to induce them to lend to companies who are exporting, a lot of the financial institutions pointed out right now, even with the incentives, they're not likely to do a whole lot more business, because their concern in the short run is their regulators who are saying, this is going to be bad, you need to pull back. And so while the private sector, rightly so, is pulling back, a lot of these government agencies realize they're going to have to lead in the vanguard. And they have traditionally always provided, as this last comment on the left-hand corner says, they've always provided this idea that they are a lender of last resort. So if I can't get term financing in Tanzania anywhere else, I should be able to go to an export credit agency, either in the US or Europe or in Asia, and they can oftentimes provide the financing where there's none other available. So that's the role of the export credit agencies. The other type of institution, and we're going to get into this a little bit more with one of my colleagues who's from formerly OPIC, now the Development Finance Corporation, is what we call development finance institutions. And these are both multilateral and bilateral institutions. Many of you have heard of the World Bank. It was previously mentioned, Africa Development Bank. These are multilateral institutions that are designed to try and lend and support projects in emerging markets. Every country also, or at least every developed world country, has a bilateral institution. In the US's case, it's this US Development Finance Corporation. The UK, Japan, all of the major economies of the world have these institutions, and they all essentially do the same thing, and that is they try and provide capital to good projects, and the schematic that I put on the board is kind of how this is done. A project, whether it be a road or an airport or a hotel, is developed. Typically, the project sponsors invest money. They may bring other equity contributions from other parties, and then the lender essentially provides money into that project as debt. And this kind of gives you the parameters of what a project finance looks like. They can lend up to as much as 75% of the total project cost in debt. Unlike traditional debt, they will tailor the grace period or the period that is required to pay back the loan over a longer period of time. They're willing to give payment terms for much longer periods of time than are likely available in the local markets. And as I say in the final two boxes, they primarily provide what we call limited recourse financing to projects. They can also, and actually in the case of the Development Finance Corporation, this is something that they have increased their charter. They can also do things like provide subordinated debt and equity. And that is something that allows that project to go forward. So in today's environment where coronavirus has disrupted everything, using these tools, whether it's the development finance institutions or the export credit agencies, are likely going to become more of a necessity than they were even 3 to 6 months ago. And I think the good news is that most of these institutions realize that. They're incentivized, and I go back to this conversation I had with the chairwoman of Exim Bank, who pointed out their mandate, their goal is to step in and provide liquidity because they know that the private sector is hurting. And I would encourage, as we look to Africa, there are two other slides, and we won't bother to go into that at this point. But I would encourage us to think about at this time when we're looking at a difficult market, to look to these export credit agencies and development finance institutions as tools that will help in developing Africa, which is going to be absolutely critical in the post-corona virus situation. And with that, I'll conclude.
All right. Thank you so much, Alan, for that presentation. And my takeaway, and I'm sure for most of us, is to let them know that businesses are still happening. You are still meeting with those decision makers. And it's very important to the powers to be that development financing, it's still continuous, and export credit. So we are happy that you're part of this network, Alan, because you are going to be called back again for follow-up. It's not just a one-off. So I'm stylishly letting you know that we are going to be calling you back, because there will be so many questions that people want to ask of us and you, and we will not exceed our 90 minutes because I am a stickler for time. And then we will have a follow-up in 2 weeks. So we're going to reach out to you to learn more on how can we practicalize some of those things you've talked about. What got me excited was when you said there are mandates that are required that people have to fulfill. Because there are mandates, people have to meet those goals. And so we are excited that you have set the stage for the next speaker, who is also from a development finance agency, Miss Roshanda Johnson. Please take it away.
Well, great. Thanks, Remy. I'd just like to begin by saying thank you for the invitation to participate. These events are always very, helpful and great for us to be a part of, to get the word out, about what we do. And so, as you mentioned, I represent an organization called DFC for short. The long name is U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, and many folks probably know us by our former moniker, OPIC, but we are a U.S. government agency in Washington, D.C. We were established by Congress in 1971, and our mission, as Alan mentioned earlier, is really to help mobilize private capital in emerging market countries. We work in over 100 countries throughout various different parts of the world, and we work on a variety of projects ranging from very small investments to large multi-million infrastructure investments. Currently, we manage a portfolio of roughly $24 billion, and we, for the purpose of this panel, I just want to highlight that, at least a quarter of our portfolio is for projects in Africa, where we're supporting SMEs in Africa. We specifically provide, a suite of financial products to support commercial investment. So you want to think of us as a bank. The product that most investors are interested in is our direct loan program. And through that program, we can provide investors direct loan up to, now I think it's $1 billion that we're able to finance for individuals who are, establishing, airports, energy projects, hospitals, hotels, schools, so we're really focused on supporting those type of investments. Basically, if they are highly developmental and commercially viable, those are the sorts of projects that we are equipped to support. Just in the interest of time, I just want to, kind of just do a very brief overview of what our eligibility criteria is, and I'm definitely happy to follow up with individuals in a one-on-one call or in this following conversation that we'll have. But to be eligible for DFC programs, again, the projects have to be highly developmental, commercially viable, and we want to make sure that they meet our requirements when it comes to the environment, workers' rights, labor rights, human rights, and also that they meet our economic standards. For individuals who do have projects that they're interested in the DFC to, consider, the very first step is to reach out to a DFC officer like myself and discuss the project. And from there, what we will usually ask the investor to do is send us a proposal, and then we will do a preliminary review of the proposal, provide feedback, and if all fares well, we will invite the investor, to submit a formal application online, and then it would be assigned to a project team who will review the project, and if they see that it's something that can make it through our origination process, they will send a retainer. And then once the retainer is paid, that's when the official due diligence begins on the project. And the total process is typically, 6 to 9 months. I will say in this COVID time period, the process may be a bit extended. As you guys can imagine, we are experiencing a lot of requests for financing, and our focus right now is really on our existing pipeline and also, supporting COVID-related projects. So, if there are investors who are working in the pharmaceuticals industry, or if they are, in producing PPE, those are projects that we're really interested in prioritizing right now. With that, I think I will stop there, if that's okay, and answer questions later on, more specific questions about our programs.
All right. Thank you, Rashonda. If I hear you clearly, you are open for business, and you are open for business in so many other fields. I mean, you've named it. As long as it's a legitimate and legal business, it looks like your company is ready to do deals. And I was reading when we were getting ready for this, I was just reading up on some of the great things that you guys are doing and how you've pumped out support and funding for health-related matters, and how you still want to meet your goals. So we are hearing it, all of us. This is not just us saying life after COVID. Businesses are still being consummated. And Rashonda, thanks for that brilliant presentation. And again, you are coming back. You are coming back. So we are going to have you come back, because I know a lot of us have questions and we won't be able to answer all of them, but the follow-up will be where we get more questions answered. And of course, they can engage with you if they desire. So thank you so much. Without further ado, watching my time, I want to also bring someone that has solutions to especially us Marylanders, Mr. Brian Casabara. This is a man with a lot of good information that we all want to take a listen to, because Maryland is open for business and they want all of us to connect with Maryland. So Brian, take it away. Welcome and thank you.
Hey, Remy, thank you for having me. I'm on my phone. Can you all hear me? Remy,
yes.
Can you hear me? Great. So, yeah, my name's Brian Castleberry. I work for the Maryland Department of Commerce. And our mission, my mission in our division, Office of International Investment and Trade, we want to help Maryland companies export. That's the bottom line. That's our focus. So we feel that Maryland has, some of the best technology, some of the best service providers, some of the smartest people, hardest working people in the country, with great solutions. So again, our goal is to export that technology into the international markets. So we have 15 offices across the globe. I happen to manage, as Remy said, the office in South Africa. but that office pretty much covers all of sub-Sahara Africa. Also manage an office in Dubai, but that office can do work in Saudi Arabia, in Turkey, and also in Israel. And then last office I manage is it's in Delhi, in India. So I'll just give a brief example on how we help Maryland companies to export. So if you have a product or service and you're curious and you want to see if it's gonna happen or fly in a particular market, so we'll say Africa, we'll get a call with my office there, and we can do a very tailored market assessment report. Mm-hmm. So give you, tell you who the competition is, tell you, what the competition is based on. Is it based on price or whatever? And then give you some advice on how to get into that market. So these work orders are free to you. It costs the state, it costs taxpayers, but you're allowed to get 2 market assessment reports per year. We also work very closely with the U.S. Department of Commerce. So I'm the Maryland Department of Commerce. We have the U.S. Department of Commerce. They have an export assistance center in Baltimore, right around the corner from us. Mm-hmm. So we work with them again to help you figure out if a market is going to be a good fit for your company. The U.S. Department of Commerce, they have something called a Gold Key program, and it's similar to what we do. And we reimburse for those. We reimburse 2/3 of the cost for those. They usually run about $1,000. And me and my partner from the U.S. Department of Commerce will usually come out to your office, sit down, see what your plans are, see where you want to go, and then we'll determine which office is stronger. I have a very strong office in Africa. My office in the Middle East is very strong, so we would probably go with the resources at Maryland. But if you were looking into Europe or another place, like the UK or Germany, we would probably use the federal services, just because, as everybody knows, relationships are everything, especially in Africa. Which I think makes everything so difficult right now with COVID. But, there's a saying, you want to get belly to belly with who you're trying to do business with. And my office has been there for 30 years, a very well-respected team of people that just know a lot of people and have those relationships that can help Maryland companies, enter that market, get networked, help with business development, grow, and succeed. There is a program that I'll talk about, and I'll end with. I'm a little pressed for time, but we have something called the Export Maryland Grant. So if your company does fit that market, and my office is maybe outline some trade shows you can go to, we can help defray some of your hotel and air and any trade show costs that you might have. These grants are $5,000. And again, it's to actually get you into that market. Now, I know with COVID-19, that is sort of, the trade show is in a holding pattern. We've had to cancel a few. I should be in London for a cyber show actually next week. We were supposed to be in Mexico for a show a month ago. We had to cancel. I'm hoping my show in South Africa. We have a big defense show in Pretoria, just north of Johannesburg, that we do every 2 years. That's slated for September. We're hoping that it's gonna we're gonna get this problem solved before then. But if not, we are trying to figure out other opportunities, virtual trade shows and things like that. So as far as actually getting to trade shows, we're in a holding pattern, but we can still do you know, some of the preliminary work and the market assessment reports for your company to explore, you know, a market that that you might feel would be a good fit for your company. So Remy, that's pretty much all I have. I have to jump off, but thank you so much for having me, and look forward to seeing you soon.
All right, Brian, stay tuned. We're coming at you again for the follow-up, so stay tuned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have all heard it that Maryland is open for business. They also have offices in different pockets of the world. So clearly speaking, these are networks that we need to leverage. So thank you very much. I'm watching my clock. Our next speaker, I'm not sure when I introduced him earlier if he was on board. Otumba Ashiru Bimbo is our next speaker. He is a doer, a great leader in the political scheme of things in Nigeria, but doing it with a technocrat attitude, getting it done mentality, not just like anybody, but being intentional about results. So we were super excited when we heard about him being the director for the Odua investment organization where he's at now. I said, wow, this is what, who better can fit that? That's like putting the right peg in the right hole. So it gives me great pleasure to bring to the podium right now, Otumba Abimbola Ashiru.
Good afternoon, good morning, and thank you for having me this afternoon. And thanks for inviting me to talk about a subject that I'm actually very, very passionate about. The pandemic issue that happened all over the world is something that is totally unexpected. So nobody actually prepared for it. But like I told some people, when things happen, you see some people that will make a lot out of it. In the area of that, people that make a lot out of that, we have the technological area, the pharmaceutical, and then the healthcare area, and the food and beverages, which is agriculture. But the most important thing now, which we need to focus on is agriculture. Agriculture that will lead into industrialization. Like I keep on telling people, we are a country that is blessed with a lot of mineral and natural resources. In Nigeria, for example, we have so many lands that are arable lands that you can grow so many things. And I will pick some of these items. You take, for example, tomato. You look at tomato value chain and you invest in tomato because you see, people will have to eat on daily basis. And during this lockdown, during this pandemic period, many people, the food and beverages industries are making a lot of money. They were actually smiling to the banks. Well, it's unfortunate it happened, but that is the period that people were actually taking advantage of. The so-called palliative measures, economic stimulus package, that is the way government actually used so many food and beverage industries to bring in food. But like I always tell people, Nigeria has no business being an import-dependent economy. We are an export-dependent economy. And I will tell you the reason why. Our cocoa that is being processed has been taken out of this country and been brought back in terms of, in form of chocolate. And so you see, processed foods being coming to this country, they are extracts from our agricultural product. So the most important thing for anybody who wants to invest in Nigeria is to focus on agriculture. Agriculture that will lead into industrialization. So that you'll be able to process, we're able to grow and process these foods and industrialize them. And those are the areas, and like I tell people, if you set up an industry, you must be able to look at agricultural land where you're going to get your raw materials. Because with this pandemic, it clearly shows that anything can happen. Don't let us be deceived. This is going to be with us for a long time, just like malaria and then the normal flu that comes in. So from my own analysis, I don't think they've actually gotten solutions to those problems. I don't think so. There are no medicine for it. So it's going to be with us for a long time. The only thing is that we have to have the new norms. And then what will happen is that we need to have a better life, social distancing and everything, preventive measures to stop that. So basically, if you look at the value chain of this agricultural product, it will help to grow things. And I will tell you, the Odua company you're talking about, the people that started Odua, it is the funds that they realized from cocoa, rubber, that is being used to build so many things in Nigeria. The first 25-story building, the first television station, there are so many things in Nigeria that happened it was from the agricultural products. I don't know what happened. We just got carried away and we moved out of it. But I'm happy with the pandemic and the realities of life. We're now coming back to agriculture. So for anybody who wants to come from anywhere in the world to invest in Nigeria, the first thing you should look at is agriculture, because it will help you. Look at the value chain. Look at tomato puree. It's been imported into this country in large quantity. It affects our foreign exchange reserve. Look at cassava. The value chain of cassava, if you look at it, it will help. You get starch, you get ethanol. Ethanol is being used to produce so many cosmetic products. Cassava starch, if you produce starch in industrial activity, all the industries in Nigeria will be able to use that starch for their own products. But what we do, we import those things into the country. It puts pressure on our economy. And I can tell you, the next question people will ask is, how are you going to cope with the land grabbers? No, we've been able to educate them, to let them know that anybody that comes in, I will give you a company that came into Nigeria, got about 1,000 hectares of land. They are growing tomato. But the problem they have is that we need to look at the mechanized system of farming and how we can help, because the preservation is not available. How are you going to preserve these things? How you move those goods from the farmland to the final consumers? I will give you a good example. We rely on tomatoes coming from the north, but now, southwest here, we started growing our own tomato. In Imeko there, we are growing tomato. In Odobolu here. So we have so many. I'm sorry for those of you who are not Nigerian, so you won't understand where I'm mentioning. But there are areas in Nigeria where you can grow, even cotton. Cotton is well grown in Ogun State. These are areas that you need to look at and be able to, attack with that. I will be honest with you, what we have done now with the new Odua Group, we've set up Southwest Agricultural Company, whereby we are going to grow. We want to take the value chain of agriculture that we lead in the organization so that we can ensure that all these things can go seamlessly. With this pandemic, we could see now that food is key. And the reason why we have the young people, the restless young ones that are protesting, that they are hungry, that it's totally key that food is the most important thing that we must focus on. Then, we need to look at areas where we are going to take advantage of that. Some years back, in 1985, Malaysians, they came to Nigeria and they took our seed, oil seed, palm oil seed, to Malaysia, and they've converted that oil seed to so many things. It is their major economic growth in that country. So what I'm saying is, for every Nigerian, and I'm happy that Nigerians have now realized that, everybody I know, they are talking about farming. And our commissioner in the state, many people, graduates, we have to look at that. And like governments, they are trying their best now to ensure that they have good roads for transportation of goods and services. Those are the areas we need to look at. We must be able to move those goods and services to the other. And you see, the organic products we're talking about, this is a country of over 200 million people. You can never fail. You will never go wrong if you invest in agriculture, because it is a country that they are now, even the president talks about that. When he goes to his village in Kasuna, in Daura, he goes to his farm to ensure that all his farm produce are there. So I think for anyone who is thinking of coming to Nigeria, you should look at how you're going to involve in agriculture. Mechanized farming is very key, because the days are gone whereby you'll be using hoes to. No, you do mechanized farming, so you can try to cultivate as many hectares of land as possible. For example, in Odua, we have over 40,000 hectares that are available for you to grow. So we are looking at partnering with people who are willing to invest in agriculture, and that is the most important thing. And another thing I want to let people know, especially our friends in diaspora, is how we can even go to the next level of agriculture. In terms of e-commerce, technology, and then we have another thing is that the logistics companies, the couriers, they will help in moving all those goods. So the most important thing now is to see how we can take advantage of that. The value chain of all these agricultural products, what will happen to them. For example, I told somebody recently that, look, there's no reason why, if we are importing about 25,000 Toyota cars into Nigeria, why can't we have assembly plants? It will create jobs for our people. The rubber plants we have, they'll be able to produce tires. The people, I mean, forest, they'll be able to give timbers that they can use to do upholsteries and all sorts of things. So we should be able to look at those areas. It's very important. And don't look at quick wins in the area of agriculture. And because I found out that what people are interested in is our oil. It will be no fashion very soon that oil will be nothing, because even look at so many cars that have been made now, electronic cars are there. So areas, things that are going to be constant. During this pandemic period, you cannot even fly your plane if you have a private jet. You can't go to anywhere. So you look at things that will help you, even within your locality. So it actually shows that you must be able to be creative within yourself. I mean, all our friends that are into event planning and everything, they are looking for other alternative sources. But with agriculture, you can never fail. You will never fail, because the value chain is there. The chain is there, and you'll be able to move from one thing to the other. So in Southwest, we are ready and we are willing to partner with whoever is willing to partner with us in the area of agriculture, which is very key. And as long as you are coming into Nigeria and support us in that area, because what we intend to do is to be able to produce food in abundance and be able to start exporting those goods. You take, for example, limestone in Nigeria. Limestone is something that is being done in Nigeria, I mean, that is natural in Nigeria. If you are investing in cement, you are guaranteed minimum of 99% of your raw materials are present. And presently now, we are doing about 45 million metric tons in this country. And our usage in Nigeria is less than 35 metric tons. So we can now export those goods. Because what I tell people is that Nigeria has no business in exporting things when we have not satisfied our people in-house. So that is the most important thing. And I think my time is fast spent, but the point is that you want to notice that agriculture that will lead into industrialization is our focus, and that should be the focus of whoever is willing to come to Nigeria to invest in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Otumba Ashiru, for that inspiring message of hope and action. And I know your conversation is a call to action. And as you were speaking, I was thinking of you, Wendy. I'm like, how come we can't let the people of Alliances know the opportunities that are there in Africa? How can we not tell other Chamber of Commerces to know what's going on now that we have a point person in someone like Otumba Ashiru? Because people do business with people they like and trust. So once we start this relationship and we trust one another, we can open up opportunities to our network here. So thank you so much for that brilliant presentation. And Otumba, you're gonna come back again. You will be called again. So please be ready to say yes to us again when we call for the follow-up. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule, and we appreciate you. So we have the best for the last. Dr. Wendy Brisley is the one that will be taking it away to kind of talk about strategic networking and how that can harness businesses. And you can speak for the next 5 minutes, and then we'll close it out. All right. Oh, I have, did I mute Dr. Wendy? Oh, I'm sorry. How did I do that? Oh my, it says, it doesn't, it's not muted.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. So there were a lot of questions that were presented today. How do we make commerce happen? How are we going to operate after COVID-19? What's going to move us into more commerce? What's going to make us prosper along? We all know that there are many changes ahead of us. And as Dr. Lulumba said, the reality depends on ourselves and moving forward. And how do we do that? How do we make this commerce, as I said, happen? Well, it's us and moving into new portals and seeing things differently. And yes, Alliances is a platform for networking to to come together so people understand the product that you have to offer and the outreach. There's statistics out there that says that we each probably know about 30 people, but those 30 people know 30 people, and those 30 people know 30 people. So what happens? Pretty soon we have 300 connections happening to make commerce happen. So we have to really flip our switch from the traditional way of reaching out to one another for our prosperity, no matter where we are, and become more of a global thinker and look at each other and say, oh, he's got a product in Africa. Oh, they have a product in Germany, but I need to get it to the United States. Oh, but I can connect with people in a different platform now to share that and to move it forward. And since we are running out of time, and I'm a stickler with time too, Remy, Dr. Remy, I am going to say, if you really want to know more about Alliances and how we do our networking and how we make this reach out, we are now called Alliances Global, because we are moving in a global world and our global atmosphere, and we are moving to make those connections globally to help all of us prosper. So if you're interested in learning more about it or attending one of our roundtable experiences where you can share your product, your business, your invention even, please feel free to ask Remy and she will share my contact information. Thank you, Dr. Remy, for all this. It was wonderful. And there were great speakers and so much happening. I loved it.
All right. Dr. Wendy, thank you so much for that closeout. And we have 1 minute and I'll wrap it up. Again, I will be remiss to not say a big thank you to all my teammates who have made today happen. I want to thank each and every one of you. Some of you are on the line, you're not. You have worked tirelessly. I want to tell you publicly that we value you, we cherish you, and we are happy and honored that you're part of the team. For all of our speakers, you guys are the best. With the short notice, you showed up and showed out, and none of you one time gave me a hard time. You made everything easy. You taught me some things I didn't know to make this work. That's what I call partnership. So we want to thank you all very much. And for all of our viewers, all of our participants, we couldn't have anything without you showing up. So we say thank you to you. We hope that this has been valuable to you and that you will be able to follow up and use some of the things you have learned here. And most importantly, before I close, I had a poem, but we're at 9:30, so I'm not going to read my poem. I'll save it for another day. I want to let you know that businesses are still being consummated right now. Do not wait and fold your hands. Think out of the box. Find creative ways you can get your energy to make prosperity for someone. Think out of the box. There is greatness in you and I. And this is the time to carve into that. Bring that greatness and align with other people. And the sky is the beginning. I look forward to all of you on this great journey. And I will read my poem next time for those of you who care to join us. You will hear from us soon because this is not a one-off event. In a few weeks, we know you have questions. You have put your questions in the chat box. We are going to get your answers, and the answers will be in another form of meeting together. Thank God for Zoom. Have you all come and ask your questions in a way. And for some of you, we'll let you know what's next. And if you're interested in what is next, you can be part of it. If you're not, you can come and enjoy the benefit of the next, and we'll keep moving. Thank you all very much. I don't want to mention you all by name. Some of you have already gone. All of our speakers, you are so wonderful. I am so thankful. And I'm so glad that you're part of this inaugural setup and that you got the vision. Because it's one thing to have a speaker, it's one thing for them to get the vision of what is going to happen. All of you got the vision, and the vision is not. It's just starting today, and we're going to make it work. It's about trade and commerce and investment locally and globally after they fix and cure COVID-19. The economy also is going to take a turn. So we are trying to be proactive to make sure that our mindset does not set up bound, that we do not think out of the box. The global stage is ready for you and I. So let's go get them. God bless you. Thank you so much. Blessings to everybody. We appreciate you and we hope to see you again. Goodbye.